The book of Proverbs, verse 16. The wages of the righteous is life, but the earnings of the wicked are sin and death. Okay, so hi everybody. This is Christian RPG Gamers. So the background footage is from the new set for Magic the Gathering, and I was just playing. I was just playing some on Arena, and I think it's called a Duskmoor. So for today's video, I wanted to talk about. I want to talk about why I love Final Fantasy, and a bunch of stuff. Just a bunch of hypothetical things that I generally like about the series, and or why I love the franchise. I feel like for the channel going forward, I want to be a little more positive. So but that takes some time, right? You got like a big ship, it takes a little rudder. You can change and you can shift to something different over time. So what are some of my personal history with the franchise? I played Final Fantasy on and off for, honestly, it's really just for a very long time. I think the first Final Fantasy game that I can remember was from the PlayStation. I think it was a PlayStation 2, from Final Fantasy X. And I think at another point in the past, I have also played. I think I played one of the Game Boy Advance games for it. So I played a Game Boy Advance game for Final Fantasy. Also, and again, because the other thing is, there are so many Final Fantasy franchises titles that I literally can't even keep track of them. I think there's like almost well over 30 of them at this point, and they also have so many different remakes, and they have spin-offs and all sorts of stuff. But at least most of the core of the Final Fantasy games, I would say, are. They are pretty solid games. And of course, I'll try to put some kind of a Christian perspective and spin on this too. But for example, I do really like the MMO version of the Final Fantasy, the Final Fantasy 14 Online. Again, that one's quite a bit of fun, and I do like open world games quite a bit. I do like RPG games quite a bit, because it's like the channel's called RPG Guy or whatever. And again, I do like playing with the other players, and like a lot of the grinding and like the different loot mechanics and getting like different sets of equipment. So I do have a strong preference towards games like FF14. And to be honest with somebody, I do really like a lot of the newer style of the Final Fantasy. And they have these long stories, and they make the worlds look really good. It plays pretty smooth. So I'm trying to think what I was going to say here. They have pretty looking they're just well crafted with like high texture resolutions, and the worlds and like the characters and like the people in them and the stories and the setting and the location, and most of the worlds in Final Fantasy, especially the newer ones, they just look and play really, really nice. And they're generally speaking, if I'm being honest, like they are pretty well written. Like some of that stuff can be subjective, but like I would argue on like especially a lot of the newer Final Fantasy games, just overall, they are objectively very good games. Especially if you kind of like set aside like some of your morality or something. Just look at it from like an objective point of view. Just the games themselves they're just pretty good. And I mean, you're probably gonna have a lot of fun. And again, I have like again, like I do think one aspect of Final Fantasy, I know I kind of mentioned it a little bit there, is that they are really good. They are really great. Or we call like Square Enix. They're really great at telling stories. That's probably one of the aspects of Final Fantasy that I think is definitely up there. So yeah, like they have storytelling, and generally speaking, I would argue that a large portion of Final Fantasy, I think for the most part overall, I feel like they are a pretty light story. Like it's more like a lot of their worlds and their characters and their what they interact with. It is it's pretty on the more on like the. It's like you have a darker version or you have like the lighter version. I do feel like most of their games are more on the light side rather than the dark side. It's kind of like a lot of times it feels like Pokemon. Like when you play a Pokemon game, like it's really hard to be that angry when playing Pokemon or interacting with Pokemon. Just like I feel like the same thing with like the same thing with like Final Fantasy for the most part. I mean, it's pretty hard to be that mad when you're playing a game like this, or you're playing like you're playing like Dragon Quest or something. It's like, I mean, you can be mad, but like it's hard not to smile a lot of times. Again, like they have warm characters. Usually the good guys usually tend to win and the bad guys tend to lose. Most of the stories are not like extremely brutal. I mean, there are some of the villains or something are kind of bad maybe, but like most of the time, I mean, they're pretty fun. They're fairly upbeat. And like, the combat tends to be pretty fun. And like you usually like when I play one of these games, or like I'll watch like a little YouTube a little game movie or something from them. More often than not, like if I'm being honest, like I do find myself probably smiling when I play a lot of Final Fantasy games. And like, yeah, I mean there can be some really dark, hard moments every once in a while, sure, but there's just a lot. There's a lot of like I would even say that, and a lot of times they have a lot of spiritual light to them. Over spiritual darkness. So again, like that is a net positive, right? At the end of the day. So I guess like okay, so I'm not even sure how I want to put a Christian perspective on this. Now I know there's a lot of negativity, and people always are angry, and like they say, like a lot of Final Fantasy has to do with the idea of the idea basically of trying to kill God. That's what the vast majority of JRPGs are designed to be created to be. Is trying to kill like your divine creator. And then ultimately at the very end of most of these JRPGs, you generally fail and the creator wins and like the people lose. It's like teaching the story of like hubris. And there is a lot of truth to this. So, but also again, like also even the worst negative aspects, in Holiness, God still defeats mankind. So it's like, even if you want to make that argument, trying to kill God, God still defeats the evil humans at the end of the day. So it's like at that point, right? At least there's that. Or in the sense that he defeats them, he teaches them some kind of a massive personal life lesson. And whoever their creator in their world is supposed to represent, in holiness, is supposed to represent God. Even though the being they make might be a little bit twisted, because humans make it. That being, more often than not, teaches humanity a level of, he teaches us, our hubris. He puts us back in our place. And I think that's one thing about JRPGs in general, is they teach the idea about hubris. And they also teach the idea of the opposite of hubris, which I guess is more of the positive aspect. And again, I'm okay with talking about negative and neutral things too. Especially if it's something that's normal or deserved, or it just happens to come up with the story, right? The deal one's hubris. I mean, it is biblical. It's just objective, right? But again, another strong aspect of Square Enix, especially if we go on to Final Fantasy also, is the idea of moral humility. I do feel like humility is displayed quite a bit in JRPG style games. Okay, so what are some hypothetical examples maybe of this? So, okay, so some hypothetical examples would be so you have the main character, and usually the main character, so obviously it's almost like a cliche or a trope, but the main character, he has a group of friends or allies that he hangs out with or associates with, or I don't always just say he, but to tell you the truth, I feel like probably 80% of the time it is a masculine main character. So when I say he, I mean literally I struggle to even come up with an example that isn't, or at least from the majority of the ones that I've played or experienced, or just JRPGs in general, but also Final Fantasy. Usually, the main character, he is associated with, he has a group of friends. They end up becoming heroes themselves. And usually there's a bunch of other people who surround the main character, who becomes his allies or his friends too. They might kind of hang out. Some of those characters only hang out in the story for a chapter or two, or maybe they show up in the ending, but usually the main character helps a bunch of people out. But also those side characters, to be honest, they probably are going to help out the main character too. And it's it shows things being meek, being meek, being humble, with a level of just lowly in spirit and lowly in nature, or you can be a little more gentle, or kind, or just just kind of a warm person sometimes. And in Final Fantasy 14, they have little, again, they show, well, not even Final Fantasy 14, but they just show in a lot of these worlds, even the more fantasy races and stuff, or maybe you got people who are depicted as younger or insignificant, how they, generally speaking, a lot of these people, they treat people pretty good, and they show a lot of respect, and then usually they're very happy, and they smile, and they're excited to be part of the story and the characters, and they help out the main character, or maybe they teach them a personal life lesson, and the main character probably is a little bit hesitant or resistant to it, but also again that is in his own right. Again, just what I'm trying to say, that is again, there are moments where you have these characters where you do feel like you smile, because it is spiritually polite, so that's why you'd be happy with it, right? They teach you a life lesson, or they humble the character, and then also they ultimately try to help the person out too. And they teach you a life lesson, but in a more good way rather than a bad way. And also in a lot of JRPGs, so yeah, I think I lost my train of thought here for a second, but Well, yeah, I mean, they show you a lot of they show you a lot about the idea of friendship and bond. They show you friendship, they show you bonds, they show you relationships. You sometimes you have a fellowship, you have a group of people that you kind of hang out with. And you develop these you kind of just grow and you progress and you learn with them. And in this sense, this is part of the story. Like this is a major part of the story. It might be overlooked by some people, but it is one of the reasons that you play these types of games. At least that's the way I perceive it. So yeah, I mean, those are just some things that I like quite a bit. And it's like, you are being humbled, and sometimes, your ego gets brought down a bit, and then also, when you choose to bring your ego down yourself, then you eventually you kind of rise your ego, because you gain some honor, right? You sacrifice a bit of your pride, but then you find like honor. And it's usually in a much better way in the long term. I do feel like this could be an example of the Christian faith, even in something like, Final Fantasy. Or I do think this could be a big issue in Final Fantasy. Like, again, like the idea of hubris, and there's also humility. So some other things that I like. So again, like one other thing about the franchise is they also just have a bajillion games, and there's like a never-ending amount of content. Again, like I can't even list you off all the names, all the different titles. And there's just like thousands of hours worth of content. Again, like they're a bit tenacious. They're again, like they persevere. And they're still also making content for it too. I mean, they're making new games. Sure, they went on and they remade a bunch of games. They remastered stuff, but they're also still making games too. And there's like Final Fantasy 16, I believe, came out. There's like Final Fantasy 14 online. Again, I'm not even sure. It's hard for me to even keep up exactly with all the names of all their DLCs or whatever. It's called Entrail, I think it's called. Or I can't remember exactly the name, but I know there's a game either coming out or maybe it's already out. But there's just so many games, and yeah, again, like the 14 online. Again, like especially like the first season of the game, it had a really. I honestly feel like it was a bit slow. But it was just overall a pretty well made. Again, it was a well made story, and like I do especially like the MMO. And again, another thing about a lot of these games are that I also think it can be a net positive, is that most of their games are not a recurring cast. So like usually you can play any Final Fantasy game, or you can watch the story of any Final Fantasy game. At least if it's a standalone, which are most of them, and you don't really need the context of all the past games that came before it. I mean, so occasionally they might have a character that's going to be part of multiple stories, but I think they have a character called either he or she is called like Sid. Sid is supposed to be like some recurring character. It's kind of like a big, almost like a gag or like a joke or something. But Sid is in like every single like Final Fantasy, at least the main titles, or he's in like so many different games. I don't even actually know, but I know he was in 15, or I guess like he represented like a girl in 15. But then he was also in 16. I think he was in a different game. Or like he was there was like a mechanic in 15. But most of the characters, you're never gonna see them in different stories. But like I also do think that can be a net positive, because like you don't have to be super heavily invested. You don't have to have watched like 15 of the games or played 15 of the stories, in order to know everything that's going on, you can just enjoy, and you can just enjoy whatever Final Fantasy you want to enjoy. And it's its own little story. And I mean, it does help. I mean, I'm being real. It does help that you at least are somewhat familiar with the franchise. I mean, if you're gonna play, Final Fantasy 16, you probably at least should have some kind of familiarity with the basic idea of how Final Fantasy would work before going in. So at least it makes some kind of logical sense. But you also don't even really have to do that necessarily either. And again, yeah, it can be a lot of fun. Let's see, how long is this currently? It's only about 20 minutes. So yeah, but yeah, I mean, again, so I guess I'm probably gonna wrap this up here soon. But again, for the channel, I do want to try to. It's like I mean, the word positive and negative, I feel like, is not really the best standard. It's like, but the idea of positivity, or more positive qualities, I can find different words. Like there's words like wholesome or honorable or maybe virtuous. I think there's a Bible verse, right, talks about that which is that which is lovely and that which is again, just a big long list of terms. Just trying to find more more good things to talk about, and focusing less on extremely negative stuff. I think that's something that I want for the channel going forward this next season. So, but again, that is not always possible to 100% do, but that would be something nice for the channel. So yeah, so I guess in the comment section below, let me know what your thoughts are about Final Fantasy. Again, let me know why you like Final Fantasy and why you enjoy it. And which specific game or which character is your favorite and why, and what is maybe what positive life lesson, story, or moral dilemma have you found from the franchise that you want to share with other people, or what are your thoughts in general about it? So yeah, thanks for watching. I appreciate it. God is good.